Scholars say conspiracy theories are moving beyond the boundaries of fringe phenomena to take on central roles to fueling public debate and political discourse. We have more on Press Perspective today. Hello and welcome to yet another edition of Press Perspective. It's Tuesday, January 14th here in Seoul, and I'm Min Sunhee. Today we touch upon the spread of conspiracy theories, fake news, misinformation and disinformation, as well as its impact in shaping public opinion and national politics. For more on this, I have Kelly Kasulis Cho with the Washington Post here in the studio. Kelly, welcome back.
Thanks for having me.
I also have Celio Fioretti with French daily Croix with us. Celio, welcome back. Happy New Year.
Glad to be here. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year, Kelly. I don't think I greeted you with that. Right, Kelly, U.S. media has been covering the impact of conspiracy theories here in South Korea on public support for President Yoon Suk Yeol. Let's begin with the gist of that coverage.
Yeah, it's been an interesting spectacle for Americans who are not super tuned in to South Korean politics. I've seen a number of articles, including some done by my colleagues at the Washington Post, kind of looking at the American symbolism that is being used right now in pro-Yoon protests. Basically, there are some similarities going on. A lot of this is founded on the conspiracy theory that the April 2024 general elections or the parliamentary elections were illegitimate or somehow rigged. A lot of Yoon's faction seems to, I shouldn't say a lot of Yoon's faction, but a segment of Yoon's faction, a fringe segment, believes in those conspiracy theories, which seem to be mostly fueled by super right-wing YouTubers. And so the idea is that, you know, this National Assembly that is more of a liberal majority that shot down his declaration of martial law is illegitimate somehow because the elections gave them the majority and the parliament is illegitimate. We know that the National Election Commission and the court system have generally found that there's no basis to these claims. That's the same with the allegations that the 2020 election in the United States was stolen from President-elect Trump. And so I think there's some kind of resonation between those two segments of supporters for Trump and for Yoon, where they see some kind of parallel. I think they also see a parallel in this idea that there's a witch hunt against President Trump as a felon, and that there's a witch hunt now going against President Yoon for his declaration of martial law. So that's kind of the coverage that's been happening in the West, is looking at those comparisons and trying to understand why those conspiracy theories are proliferating.
Right, indeed. Celia, sadly, there's also been quite a bit of shocking fake information regarding the recent tragic plane crash at Muan International Airport. What have you been hearing?
Indeed, there's a disturbing pattern of online hate speech and misinformation has emerged in the wake of the tragic Jeju plane crash at Muan International Airport, especially targeting the victims and their grieving families. Amongst the most notable instances, there was a derogatory post suggesting that the victims' families were delighted to receive a compensation from the government. A man in his 30s was arrested for posting a comment that read, "Think about how much the compensation for all those people and family with multiple deaths must be thrilled." It's very nasty comments. And baseless rumors also circulated about the flight crew as well, falsely claiming that both the pilot were women, explaining why the plane had a crash, fueling a surge of misogynistic comments, even though both pilots were identified as male. So police are now tracking down accounts spreading misinformation about the crash and also deleting any defamatory comments. The South Jeolla Province Police Agency announced on Friday that he has sought raid warrants for 6 online accounts spreading misinformation about the crash. Fake news also targeted Park Han-chin, a representative of the bereaved families, falsely accusing him of being a leftist, and that the whole situation was provoked by the Minjudang, the opposition, the liberal opposition in the assembly. Of course, he has no links with any political affiliation. But as Kelly said, it's mostly fueled by this hyper right-wing conservative YouTuber online. And you can see the whole political turmoil in Korea has found some echo in the crash. So this alarming trend of fake news and misinformation also happened in previous national tragedy, in both the Seoul ferry disaster and the Itaewon crowd crush more recently. Biré family were also subject to this kind of attack online and misinformation and baseless rumors. So it has been a current trend, and it's getting more and more intense by the years.
Right, unfortunately. And Kelly, this phenomenon of false stories, it's not limited to South Korea. I mean, the raging wildfires in the Los Angeles area, I believe, have started, and I'm quoting, a storm of misinformation. What more can you share?
Yeah, well, first of all, I just want to take this opportunity to say that every major disaster, whether it's human-made or natural, that I have covered as a journalist, I would say there is a danger of picking up fake news. I've seen it on social media almost every time, where old video footage from another fire or another disaster is shared and shown as something that's happening now, especially with the ability to create AI video and AI images. We're seeing this more and more. We saw it with the war in Gaza as well, some false inflammatory information being shared and false images. And this is really no different. There was a viral video of the Hollywood sign burning that turned out to be fake. There's been viral social media circulated news stories saying that ICE, which is kind of like the Immigration Enforcement Bureau in the United States, that they're going to use this as an opportunity to round people up and deport them. And this has a really big chilling effect, because if you're someone who's undocumented or who's worried about that, maybe you don't follow evacuation orders, maybe you don't seek shelter or aid that you need, and therefore you endanger yourself and your family. Maybe you then hamper firefighting efforts or traffic routing efforts because you're afraid that you're going to be essentially detained at some kind of checkpoint. So these things have a really negative effect on public safety, and they happen almost every time. I mean, I remember during the tragic crowd crush, there was also a lot of false reports about what started the crush. Certain people were identified from social media footage and wrongly blamed for a disaster that is not probably, the result of one person's decision that night. So, I mean, this is a really big thing. And I say this because as social media users, we should be careful when we see something that is shocking or unbelievable or that captures our eye. We should really look to see if that's something that is verifiable before we share it. And we just, especially in the current model where users on X make money from engagement and people can pay for verification now, there's an incentive to put out fake things. And if it's shocking, there's probably a good chance that someone's using it to create revenue. And it could be real, but it might not be, and just taking that extra beat is really important before you share something.
Right, some valid advice right there. Now, with regard to possible explanations for this rampant spread of fake news, the French media, Celio, I believe, touched upon Korea's ultra-connected environment, saying that this makes it particularly vulnerable. What more can you add?
Indeed, I covered this topic this year, and South Korea has a very specific environment which appear to be very fertile for the spread of fake news. YouTube here, as we mentioned, plays a major role in spreading misinformation. If you take the subway at rush hour, everybody's looking at their phone and mostly looking at political shows. So there are thousands of these small channels talking about news and the latest political scandal. The anchor is usually not a journalist, it's just someone that has a political opinion with a tone more acid, more aggressive than the traditional media. And it works well because these channels accumulate millions of views on a daily basis. And I've talked to an expert on the matter, John Min Jung from the Korean Press Foundation, and she explained to me that around 97% of South Koreans watch YouTube on a daily basis. So it's for them, it's really a way to get on a quick hand information for daily news. But these self-proclaimed journalists online on YouTube making political podcasts, for them the limit between information and disinformation is very thin. Now these channels are from all sides of the political spectrum, both left and right, but the latter seems to be more dominant with a good reception from the elderly with anti-immigration or anti-LGBT message. So really the hardcore conservative really has an echo chamber on YouTube. And even some radical churches give them money and support these things to spread misinformation that will, in the end, influence the local politics. So why many people watch this content, actually? Well, there's something to do with the lack of trust in media in South Korea. Only 30% of South Koreans believe in traditional media, newspaper, radio, television. So because they don't trust these media, they turn to alternative source of information, these YouTubers. So what can be noted, explained to me John Minjung, there is a lack also of education and regulation about fake news. Education to media is very crucial, and in Korea it's almost non-existent. People don't always know or are not always taught how to be more critical of what they see online, to know like, oh, this is probably very biased because the source is linked to specific political affiliation. Moreover, during only election time, there's a really limit on what you can say, but outside of election time, there's no really regulation, no sanction against spreading misinformation. So I think that's also one way Korea can work to reduce the impact of this fake news, more regulation and telling people to be more aware and more critical of what they see online.
Right, indeed. Now, Kelly, earlier on, speaking within your capacity as a journalist, you spoke about your concerns regarding the presence of fake news. And Celio has just touched upon the need for perhaps greater public education here to raise awareness about the presence of such misinformation and disinformation. Do you suppose more can be done to this end?
I do. I think, unfortunately, this is a problem that I alone am not qualified to fix. I mean, the whole industry is really grappling with this. The reasons why fake news is dangerous is quite obvious, but the factors that have led up to it are so complicated and something that the media industry so badly wants to resolve and doesn't seem to be able to so far. I think, you know, there are a lot of merits to the internet and the .com boom and social media, but some of the demerits of it is that, you know, media has become very decentralized. We used to live in an ecosystem where people who were trained as journalists, who put their names on their stories, who worked at organizations with very specific standards for the kind of information that they print, and all, you know, every single word that was uttered was, you know, looked at by editors and things like this. So it was a very careful storytelling process. That used to be something that we sell, that the general public would buy and read. And there are issues back then too, you know, newspapers that pandered to certain crowds and, you know, printed false or incorrect or, you know, salacious news. But still, there was, you know, a set of principles and standards that we followed, and not anyone could just put out information. But now, in this world that we live in, social media, anyone can be a content creator, anyone can masquerade as a journalist, and I think the distinction between the two is kind of losing relevance among the average user of social media or the internet. And so, you know, it reduces the quality of the information. It defunds media organizations, so to speak. They're losing revenue, so they can't afford to pay high-quality journalists in the volume that they used to have. A lot of media organizations have been slashed or have essentially shrunk down to what they once were. I mean, in the 90s and 2000s in the United States, a lot of local newspapers had people stationed in the Middle East, you know, being our checks and balances on what's happening in our wars. Now, maybe the biggest newspaper might have 1 or 2 people at such a place. So we're really losing a lot here. I think to explain to like a general reader some of the just, you know, ground level examples of why this matters. For instance, at a newspaper like the Washington Post, or honestly any legacy media, at least in the United States, generally speaking, anonymity is not granted to just anybody, and the circumstances have to be pretty compelling, like that person could lose their life or their job, and even then we still might not grant anonymity, right? And why is that? Because if that person is not willing to say something with their name and face attached to it, chances are it could be bogus, or they don't really believe in what they're saying, right? And so when you have people who are creating content or repackaging content from legacy media on like TikTok, for instance, they don't necessarily have those kinds of standards. Their full identity might not be revealed. They're not held to the same standards. And so although I think the legacy media also needs to change a little bit to continue to adapt to the way that others consume media and to win that trust back, fake news and kind of decentralized content creation is also kind of fueling this vicious cycle. And again, the business models of all of this are far more complicated than
right.
I
They're
can
very
alone
complicated.
fix, right.
For sure, for sure. Moving on, Celio, France last summer, I believe, to be specific, August, made headlines for arresting Telegram founder Pavel Durov on allegations of not being able to control criminal content on his social media platform. What has been the broader impact of his arrest, Celio?
Well, the arrest of Telegram's founder and CEO in France, along with potential future action, reflects on a growing recognition among governments and authorities that the traditional regulatory approaches used over the past decades have not been strong enough to really address the harms of social platforms. So authorities now are coming to the realization that to effectively curb the spread of disinformation, hate speech, incitement to violence, but also dangerous illicit activities online, they could be more strong countermeasure. It also nowadays it's a matter of also sovereignty against some propaganda campaign trusted by China, Iran, Russia, especially on Telegram. So Pavel Durov built Telegram at first as an anti-censorship application, a haven for all voices, even the most extreme. And he prided himself defying any government authority and regulators. But his arrest and indictment in France were among the few ways France resorted to really put pressure on the company to really fix the problem they have on the platform. A month after his arrest, Pavel Durov agreed to cooperate with the French authorities, giving IP addresses and phone numbers when the police requested them. As of 2024, Telegram answered to almost 900 requests from the French government, which represent around 2,000 users' information given to the police, mostly for illicit activities online, such as drug dealing, but also pedopornographic images. So it's a lot more than previous years, and you can see that the arrest of the CEO really had an impact on the company, because in 2023, for example, Europe already had a law to promote cooperation between social media platforms and governments, but at the time, Telegram didn't apply by the rule, and only around 200 requests from the police were answered by Telegram. But after the arrest of Pavel Durov, this amount reached up 600 or 700. So they really realized that now they can be endangered. They can be asked for responsibilities in all this crime that happened online. And so now the other governments in Europe, but also in the world, are looking at how the cooperation between Telegram and the French government will hold and last over time. So maybe they can do something similar.
Right. And Kelly, Durov's arrest itself, though, it appears to have sparked quite a bit of public debate with regard to freedom of speech and social media responsibility. What appear to be the main points of contention?
Yeah, I mean, this case is honestly just the latest of many that we've seen over the last couple of decades, where the crux of the question is really who is responsible for bad behavior online? Is it the government? Is it the social media platform? Is it the users themselves who should be policing each other? And then further down, how do we define bad behavior? And is this a slippery slope? I think, obviously no one wants child pornography or sex trafficking to somehow find its way to social media platforms or to places like Telegram. But when this happened and then he complied with investigators, there was a small exodus of, for instance, activists from countries where, they feel like they're being monitored by their government and could face prosecution for, fighting for human rights or things like this, that left the platform because they took this as a signal of if you're cooperating with authorities on this issue, who's to say that you won't cooperate with the authorities on another issue, right? And in what countries will you cooperate with authorities, and where is the line? This is a tough question. I mean, YouTube, for instance, has people who monitor for things like signs of sex trafficking, child exploitation, the use of, deploying rats, which is like a hacking method to film people on their web cameras without them knowing, and then putting that video footage online. So platforms usually have some kind of paid monitoring body, but there's always the question of where do we draw the line for the kinds of behavior online that we prosecute, and who takes the fall? Is this a civil issue? Is this a criminal issue? And then there's jurisdictions, right? So it's really tough question. And in terms of free speech, I think there are some really valid concerns. But at the end of the day, I don't think anyone's defending child pornography or sexually explicit content on these platforms. Which, by the way, we don't actually know the detailed nature of this content, or what it is, or what exactly is being investigated. There's just been some kind of vague descriptions. But this has been going back to the days of tapping phones, of Amazon Alexas, allegedly listening to people and learning from the way that they speak. I mean, it goes far beyond Telegram. Right. It really does.
Right. I believe we have time for one quick question. Kelly, Meta recently spoke about ending its fact-checking program to replace it with a community-driven system like the one that Elon Musk's X promotes. Could you tell us a bit about this? What has been the response to Meta's decision?
Yeah, it's been met with some criticism. Some people see it as Mark Zuckerberg cowing to President Trump in a time where, he's obviously going to take office again. He was banned from Meta and other platforms for his, fake news that he was circulating and inflammatory speech. And now this is kind of being seen as a repeal of that. Part of the policy seems to be that people can say, things that are anti-LGBTQ or things that are against certain racial groups that maybe was censored before. Zuckerberg himself in his remarks said that he does think that this will probably allow for more, quote, bad stuff on the platform, but that Meta has made the mistake of over-censoring before, and a lot of people have expressed that they feel like their political views don't have a free, fettered platform on Meta. I don't know what the answer is, but it's certainly a really controversial decision in the United States.
Right, for sure, at the moment. Well, I'm afraid that's all the time we have. Kelly, as always, thank you very much for your time and your thoughts.
Thank you.
And Celio, thank you very much for your insights.
Thank you.
Right, as always, thank you for watching, and we'll see you back here same time tomorrow.